This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
A lot of times people think that if they just accept it, that they're not fighting for what they really want, right? That they're being passive, right? It's the, what do you want for dinner? Oh, I don't care. Like, you know, kind of, oh, like, you're not my dad. Like, oh, I'm just supposed to wave that off or, you know, like, or whatever.
Right, yeah.
No, that's not the same, like, not the same thing.
Absolutely.
Like, at all.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of times it gets confused with communication of compassion or love. Like if we're, you know, showing acceptance, like, you know, to those people who hurt us, right. With like this information, like the withholding, you know, and so that again is, you know, a big factor of why people are hesitant, you know, to maybe step or lean in to acceptance.
In this very special bonus episode of DNA Surprises, I'm joined by Jennifer Spencer, who's facilitating a session on radical acceptance at the DNA Surprise Retreat. Jennifer is a licensed professional counselor who works with people who want to make lasting change for themselves to better their relationships, enjoy life, and make an overall life worth living. She specializes in DBT, CBT, ACT, and EMDR. In our discussion, we chat about what radical acceptance is and is not, and why it's important for our DNA surprise journeys. Today, I am joined for a very special bonus episode with Jennifer Spencer, and she is a therapist who is going to be joining us at the DNA Surprise Retreat, and she will be facilitating a session on radical acceptance. So thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for asking me.
Just to kind of get started and let everyone get to know more about you, can you share a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I became a therapist in 2007. And for about 12 years, I worked in community mental health. And it was in 2009 that I got the opportunity to go and be specifically trained in what's called dialectical behavioral therapy. So that's one of my main approaches when I work with people. And so one of the things that has in it is radical acceptance. And so that's where my connection to this topic and to wanting to, you know, promote this topic, like to therapists, to other clients, all of those kinds of things, like kind of comes from. Opened my private practice in 2017. And so have been in that arena doing therapy for a few years now.
Now, I've heard of DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. It seems relatively new. I think for a long time I heard CBT and other things like that. So for people who aren't familiar with it, what is DBT?
So DBT has actually been around since like the mid 80s, but it was primarily used first and foremost in hospital settings, inpatient type of work versus like the outpatient therapy that I think more people are pretty familiar with, right? However, like it has grown tremendously from what it was once used for to now expanding to a myriad of kind of diagnoses and difficulties and things like that. And so DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy, and it's this approach to managing emotional responses, learning how to navigate like social situations, really hones in on incorporating not just CBT, because it does have some CBT components, but it also brings in some of the more traditional like Eastern medicine practices like mindfulness, meditation, and that sort of thing. And so kind of combines all of that, right, to be a modality. And so we really focus on learning mindfulness, learning distress tolerance, learning emotion regulation skills, and then learning interpersonal effectiveness skills.
All skills that I think apply greatly to people in the DNA surprise community, right? Like distress tolerance is huge. Yeah. And, most of the feedback that I get when doing groups, I would say in every cohort that I get, where was this when I was in high school? It's more like what people consider like a life skills training, and so that's, been a helpful thing for me to also like promote people having DBT or using DBT or getting the experience of the DBT like skills training is we all need some help, because as we go through life, like our situations change, and not knowing how to deal with it, we're not supposed to know how to deal with everything, right? Right.
And so, getting this help on board, having these tools, they can just make life a little bit easier for us. And I think everybody needs a little bit of that here and there.
Absolutely. I love that piece of DBT, the skills. I have the whole workbook myself, actually. And, running through it and being able to script conversations and do exercises when things get tough has been instrumental in my healing journey. So I'm so excited to share some of this with the retreat attendees. And so the area that we're really focusing on for your session is radical acceptance.
Yes.
And this has been a huge part of my journey. And when Debbie and I were planning the retreat, that was like the first session that I said, I want a session on radical acceptance.
We have to have this.
We do. And I think you were the first facilitator that I spoke to, because it was so important to me to have that, because I just think it's so huge.
Okay. So no pressure then, right?
No pressure. But for people who don't know, in terms of DBT, what is radical acceptance?
So radical acceptance is a part of distress tolerance. So if we're breaking it down by module and you want to know where to look for it, like in that big manual you referred to, it is in distress tolerance. And so what it means, or what you do with radical acceptance, is it's when we stop denying. It's when we stop fighting what our reality is. Right. And so, yes, we may not like what we just heard or what we saw in an email or a report from like a genealogy place. We may not like that. That may not be what we wanted to see. That may not be like the information we wanted to get. And we have to understand and we have to be willing to say, this is what it is. And this is how and what. From this point on, I have this information and I need to use it and I need to incorporate it in my life versus fight it.
This episode is brought to you by Honda. Introducing the all-new, all-terrain Honda Passport Trail Sport, the most off-road capable Honda Passport Honda has ever dreamt up. The Passport features increased ground clearance, roof rails on all trims, and available specially developed all-terrain tires. And you'll stay comfortable with tri-zone climate control and available features like heated and ventilated front seats and a panoramic moonroof. Learn more at honda.com/passport.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
Yeah. Can you talk more about what that might look like for somebody who's had a DNA surprise? Because I think there's the facts, right? We get the report, we see the ancestry results, we put that together. There's also this huge piece of feeling deceived, betrayed by our parents, loved ones, sometimes more people. So what does radical acceptance look like in the context of a DNA surprise?
The other part that we talk about and that we point out in radical acceptance is that any of us, because we're human, right, we are going to have pain in our life. And I think we tend to understand physical pain better in some ways, right? But emotional pain is just as valid and is just as needed in the sense of being taken care of. Right. And so what I think would be the thing that would come up is that, like you said, there would be this emotional pain of feeling betrayed, feeling lied to, feeling vulnerable now, because we don't know that our environment, we don't feel our environment is full of safe people anymore.
That's such a good way to put it.
But what it does to stay in that place of then saying, then I'm going to no, kind of thing, right? Is that we stay in this place of suffering with that information. Pain is different than suffering. And radical acceptance is what, again, doesn't take away the pain. That's still something. But radical acceptance helps us not suffer as long as we might.
Yeah.
And we don't want to. I've never met someone who says, I want to suffer, Jen. I'm not saying I won't at some point, but we tend to put those two concepts together and think that they can't be split apart. Right? We hear them together all the time.
Yeah, pain and suffering. Yeah.
Pain and suffering. They aren't the same thing. And that's what radical acceptance says. Radical acceptance says these are not the same things. You do not have to have this suffering component to this information. And radical acceptance will help alleviate that longevity of suffering, that intensity of suffering, that feeling or trapped in suffering.
Oh, that's such an interesting perspective. I never thought about the fact that pain and suffering are separate, because you're right. We do hear them intertwined.
Yeah, we hear them in our world, right? Are you going to sue for pain and suffering?
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, they both exist. They both, are there, but they are different. And we need to see that they're different and know how, taking care of ourselves, is getting ourselves out of suffering. Think about, again, using a more physical pain analogy, to help us understand. Think about if you have a headache. Now, there's lots of things that we can do, for a headache. But if we choose not to do those things, our headache tends to last a lot longer. Right?
We suffer. Yeah.
We suffer. But if I say, oh man, I really my head is really hurting. The last time that I had a headache, I went and I lay down and, and I kind of closed my eyes, and that really helped, me feel better. I'm going to try that. Maybe, asking someone to rub your temples, because again, we want to alleviate. Maybe it's I do have a headache. I need, to take an aspirin. All of those things are us accepting that we have a headache and going forward with alleviating. And so alleviating the suffering.
That totally makes sense. So as we talk about emotional pain and suffering, we talk about DNA surprises and how that makes people feel. And I know we're going to go much more into this at the retreat, but what are some examples of the aspirin that you might take to help you accept your surprise?
So a lot of times what we have to do first is we have to ask, like, why are we not wanting to, right? Because it's almost like counterintuitive that we know like what acceptance doesn't mean to help us then actually practice acceptance. Acceptance isn't that we approve of what's going on. And so if that's something that we're kind of holding of like, well, if I accept it, it means that I'm okay with it. It means that it's all good. Radical acceptance is not approval. Radical acceptance is, it just is.
Yeah. And it kind of going back to your headache analogy, I'm not okay with having a headache, but I do have one.
But I do have one. And so if I want that to go away and go away quickly, and I'm going to have to start doing stuff. Right? Like I'm going to have to do my tricks. I'm going to have to remember what's worked for me in the past. I'm going to, right? And I'm going to start doing those things to see if I can't make that go away.
Yeah.
Right? Make that pain dissipate.
Yeah. It is what it is, right? That's kind of the saying.
It doesn't change the fact that that happened, but it maybe like limits how long it lasts.
Yeah.
But if we think that that approval has to be a part of acceptance, we're going to resist that for sure.
So I can say personally, this was a struggle for me. And I've heard it come up a lot in the DNA Surprise community. And it's the forgiveness component. And not saying that people can't or shouldn't reach forgiveness, but is radical acceptance forgiveness?
No.
It's just this happened. It's just facts.
It's just this happened. And I think that forgiveness probably comes up within this community more specifically. And if this wasn't your personal experience, I'd love to hear that too. But I think the other part that tends to get there is with forgiveness is because it's a loved one. Right. Right? Like there's a big word that should.
Yeah.
And so like we put that in there too, right? Like I should forgive them. Like I should, like, because, and the only reason that we have on the other side of that is like, they're my family, they're my mom, they're my this, they're my like, right. And that sort of thing or whatever. And while that potentially may be a value for you. And so working towards forgiveness is super important if that's the case. And so I'm not saying,
if that's a value.
Yeah, I'm not saying that we don't, want forgiveness, like, and we don't want to see forgiveness and, that sort of thing. But radical acceptance does not equal forgiveness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a piece of forgiveness because I'm not sure that we can have forgiveness without acceptance.
I think that's really true.
But I think the other way is not true. We can have acceptance without being totally in the place of forgiveness yet.
I feel like I just had a little breakthrough there because I do feel I had like my aha moment because I do feel like it was easier for me to move to a place of forgiveness after I had gone through the radical acceptance phase for sure. And practicing it, right? It's constant. It's not like you just accept it and then you're done.
No. And that's the other part that I think we have to, like you were asking, like, what are the tricks or what are the tools or what are the things? And I think our mindset about that we have to continually practice acceptance. That it's not, okay, I've done it. Like, I never have to do that again. I also talk to people about, we tend to see it as one big thing. Acceptance is layers. It is pieces, parts that we're working on accepting. It's usually not the whole enchilada all at once that we're
I like that.
Practicing acceptance on.
That's because with the DNA surprise, there's layers, right? There's the initial accepting the result. Then there's accepting the family dynamics, whatever the circumstances were of your conception. There's accepting where your relationship is now, with your family, with your found family.
Acceptance of what now the future might be, right? And might look like or can look like versus we may have not thought about, certain things being in our future until we got this information.
Yeah. Yeah. So there are so many different pieces to practice that.
And you don't have to be accepting of that first layer that you talked about. Like that doesn't translate to then total acceptance to all of the layers, right? Like it's work at every piece, every place.
Yeah. Oh, I just love this topic. I feel like I could talk about it forever because I can't say enough about how I'm definitely a should person. That is something that I have had to practice letting go of, right? Especially in this context. This shouldn't have happened. I should have been told the truth. All of those things. And the reality is I wasn't, and that's the truth. And so, So for people who are interested in attending the retreat, what more are we going to talk about? Can you give a little more of a sneak preview?
Sure. So I definitely make sure people know like what we're talking about. So kind of like we did here, like what it is, what it means, why it's important for us as humans, because there are things about like not accepting that like really affect our mental health, really affect us. One part of doing this work is really like only for us, right? So that like we are not in that place forever of feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you open that, letter or you get that information, there's unhappiness there maybe. There's anger there maybe. I don't want to be stuck in that.
No.
That's not a particular emotion that I just want to be all the time and have all the time and, all of those things. Those emotions have a purpose, don't get me wrong, but they're also very heavy.
Yeah.
And I don't want to keep that around and things. And so accepting reality, accepting our reality is very much crucial to us living freely, living happily, living the life we want to lead. And so this work is not for anyone else. It's for us.
Oh, I think that's so important to touch on. It is it's for your own peace of mind.
Yeah. And then definitely, like you said, like we want to give some examples that hopefully like kind of clear up for people and open their mind, right? To like how they've already been accepting of so much stuff, right? And maybe not like thinking that they've really done it before, right? Because that can like also be a reason why we don't think we can do it, right? And so we just don't want to try.
Yeah, but we're already doing it in other places. I love that.
Yeah. So if you like steps to radical acceptance, some tips like to keep you practicing, those are all like kind of points that I want to be able to just touch on, right? So that if people are and see themselves wanting to go that way, that maybe they know that therapy could be a helpful outlet to help address those things on a more intimate level, then we'll probably be able to do it at a retreat like this, right?
In a group setting, for sure.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. And then lastly, like direct them if they are thinking that this is a piece that they're kind of struggling with, knowing what to ask for, when you go in to like a therapist's office, because they may or may not be familiar with DNA surprises. Being able to kind of say like, I, want this type of therapy. I want this. Do you do this? Even before you go in, so that that they know what you're wanting to work on and that they have that in their background.
I love that.
Right?
I love this perspective that it's so empowering and it's for us, people in this community who have had these things happen to us, but that we can integrate them into our lives and still have really full, happy lives. I think that's such an important message. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
You're so welcome.
I can't wait for the retreat and for people to get this amazing information. And thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoy this topic as much as I do, I hope you'll join us at the retreat, May 4th through the 7th, in Tucson, Arizona. You can learn more at DNASurpriseRetreat.com. Until next time.